Welcome to GirlDadNation. In this episode, I welcome Ralph Martinez. Ralph has an amazing story of overcoming homelessness and the demons of drug addiction. He'll celebrate 10 years of sobriety this year, and he is now a major leader in his community of Española, New Mexico. He has 3 daughters, 1 son, and 3 granddaughters. In part 1, Ralph explains how his family was a major motivator in his recovery. And then in part 2, he shares about his daughter's love of reptiles and hunting dragons together. Let's get to it. Ralph, well, thank you so much for being on the show with me.
Yeah, well, thank you for inviting me. I'm humbled to be a part of this show. Being a parent is it's a unique experience, very privileged and blessed experience. And so to see fathers like you taking the time to do things like this is just it's just a beautiful thing. And so thank you for including me in it.
Of course. Yeah, I first met you in Santa Fe, and you were already doing community work there. I think I was helping you with a car show that you were doing in Española. Yeah, and then you've been heavily involved in the community in Española. And then you've got 4 kids and 2 grandkids. Is that correct?
I got three granddaughters.
Three granddaughters. Wow.
3 granddaughters. Yeah.
Yeah. Congratulations. That's such a joy.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. My granddaughters, Alexis, Mariana, and Alina, they're 6, 5, and 2. Yeah. And then my daughter Ava is 6. And so they're all in the same age range. And so whenever they get together, It's a beautiful thing to see them interacting and playing, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Now, tell a little bit about your story. I've heard it, and I know that you've shared it a lot, but about 10 years ago, I think you said you were addicted to cocaine and heroin, and you were homeless for a time. So yeah, just share a little bit just about that journey for you, just where you were at it.
Yeah. So a little bit about me. I was born and raised here in Española, New Mexico. I graduated from Española Valley High in 1996. Shortly after I graduated, I got into a real serious relationship with my high school sweetheart, and she was a year older than me. And at the time, she already had 2 kids. She had Samantha and Brandon, and Samantha and Brandon were 2 and 3 at the time. I was 18 and their mother was 19. And I stepped in as their father figure at that time. Me and their mother were together for a period of 11 years. Within that time, we had a child of our own, Natasha, who's 18 years old now. And so we settled down together in 1998, I think it was, when we got our own place, and we begun this family life, right? Well, in that time, even before that, I had started to experiment with drugs. Since high school, I had started to experiment with, drinking and cocaine. And then it got to a point where it just started to consume me after the years started to go by after me and the kid's mother had got together. And in 2001 is when I became fully addicted. And I say I became fully addicted in 2001 because it was in that year where I woke up one morning and I just felt the addiction. Your body acts different, your mind thinks different. You're having cravings that you almost can't control. And at the time, you really don't know what's going on, but you just know that you need these substances in order, or you feel like you need these substances in order to function. And so in 2001, I became addicted, fully addicted. And so I was addicted for a period of 11 years. So I became addicted in 2001. In 2003 is when we had Natasha. We had a child together. And at the time, you know, I think everybody was hoping, my family and even myself, that would help for me to balance myself out in the road that I was going down. And yeah, you know, the road of addiction that I was going down. And unfortunately, it didn't at the time. By 2006, there was just so much that had happened already in my relationship. And because of my addiction, you know, my children's mother, she wasn't a drug user, and she was a hard worker, a really good mother, and she wanted to grow in the things of life and achieve, you know, goals, and I was just really doing the opposite of that, right? And so she put up with a lot between 2001 and 2006. For sure, for the last 2 years that her and I were together, she really put up with a lot. And I was never physically abusive. That's just not who I am. But I was really emotionally abusive and financially abusive because of the addiction, and that can be just as bad as physical abuse, right? And so it weighed a lot. So in 2006, my children's mother, she called it quits. She had tried hard. She tried hard. I think at the time she really believed that I would make a pivot. I would make a change. She knew who I was on the inside, but she also saw what I was becoming on the outside, right? And and she let a lot of things slide. And in 2006, by the time we got to the year 2006, I had already done a lot, even to my family on my side. My mom, I was raised by a single mother, and my mom, we grew up in poverty. You know, my dad left when I was 2 years old, and he left to another state. And so he was never present. And when he left, my mom was really young. She was 19 years old, raising two children, me, and I have an older brother who's a year and 7 months older than me. And she was in the low incomes at the time. And, you know, she worked really hard to get us out of that environment and to get us our own place and our own home. And so so by 2006, I had already started to do a lot when it came to my personal family, when it came to my mom, and when it came to my brother. And what I mean by that is I had started to do things that wasn't normally me, stealing things that didn't belong to me, taking things that didn't belong to me from the households of, you know, my mom and my brother, and because of my drug addiction. And of course I was doing that in my own home. And so it got to a point where my mom would tell me, Ralph, you're gonna lose everything. You're gonna lose everything. And if you do, don't think that you're gonna come to my house and do the same thing that you're doing at your house, because that's not what happened. I had already started to burn these bridges, right? So in 2006, when my children's mother, she pulled the plug on the relationship. And I remember the night that she pulled the plug on the relationship. I remember looking at her. You know, when you're with somebody for so long, you know who they are, right? You can look into their eyes. And I remember the night that she pulled the plug. I saw someone different, right? And she was tired, and I don't blame her. When she told me that I had to leave that particular night, all I can think of was, I wonder what took her so long, you know? Because I knew what I was doing to my family. I knew what I was doing. And so at that point, when I left, well, I had nowhere to go, because my mom and my brother and my immediate family on my side had already been warning me for years, don't think you're going to come over here and do that same stuff. And so that's when I became homeless. I became homeless in 2006. I ended up underneath a bridge here in Española. And for the first year of my homelessness, I lived under that bridge. And, when you get to that point in life, you kind of only take yourself even further down. I started
Yep.
using heroin a lot more. Before, it was just cocaine. It was just cocaine, and I did dabble with heroin just a little bit. But when I got to that point where I was homeless and under the bridge, you almost feel like you just want to be numb from reality, right? And
Yeah.
so I started using heroin a lot more, and so the addiction got worse. The addiction got worse, but even during my homelessness, I always thought about my kids. I grew up without a father. I grew up without a father,
Yeah.
and I always said growing up, I never want to be that father, right? I never want to be that person that's not there for the kids, because I knew what it was like to grow up without that other parent. And I got to a point in my life sitting underneath the bridge, kind of looking around thinking, how did I become worse than the person that I never wanted to become, right? And that was a hard reality. That was a really, really hard reality. And it would break me. It would really break me. And there was times, and I always stayed in communication with the kids. I'd go, back then there really wasn't cell phones. So I'd go to pay phones and I'd call. And luckily, my kid's mom, she was understanding, really super understanding. And
Yeah.
she never pushed me away. She never said, oh no, you're in that place, I don't want the kids around that, you don't belong in their life. Or she never did that. Every time I called, and she would allow me to talk to them. And there was times where I would break down. And there's a little mom and pop burger stand next to the bridge that I was staying under, and it's called Dandy Burger. And so I would walk from the bridge over to Dandy Burger, and there's a payphone outside of Dandy Burger, and I would call her, and I would start crying, and she would tell me, Ralph, what are you doing? And I would tell her, I have no idea what I'm doing right now. I have no idea. All I know is I miss the kids and I really want to see them. And she would tell me, where are you at? And I would tell her, I'm at Dandy Burger, at the payphone at Dandy Burger. And she would say, okay, let me get the kids together. I'll drive over there. I'll be there in 45 minutes. You'd better be there. And I'd tell her, I'll be here. And so I'd wait. There was these little outside picnic tables that they had for people who wanted to eat outside, right? With these little umbrellas. And so I would sit there and I would wait, and she would take them. She would take the kids, and the kids were really young at that time, and they didn't know really what was going on. They knew something was going on, you're right, and not exactly. They didn't have that full understanding of the situation that I was in or that we were in. And she would take them over, and we'd sit down, and there'd be some tears, and I'd cry, and they would cry sometimes, but we would talk, and I would try to explain to them according to their age and their understanding, right? And I would tell them, just know that that I'm going through something, and sometimes people in life, they go through something, and I don't know what's going to happen, but just know that I love you and I think about you guys. And so I was always staying connected no matter what. And so I was homeless for a period of 6 years, from 2006 to 2012. And in between that time, I went to many different rehabs. I wanted to quit. I wanted to change. I didn't know how. So there was a lot of trial and error in between that time. I went to rehab in San Diego. I went to rehab in South Florida. I went to rehab twice in Farmington. I went to rehab in Hernandez. And my last rehab in 2012 was in Velarde, New Mexico, at a place called Oi Recovery. And all the places that I went to, we always stayed connected. When I went to San Diego, that was my first rehab. I would be allowed one call a week, and they were the ones that I would always call, right? I'd check in on them. The rehab that I was at would take us to a Goodwill once every other week. And they would allow us like $20 of store credit, right? And so the rehab would take us to the Goodwill, and we'd be allowed to like get things that were worth like $20 or whatever. There was a bunch of us, and so they had to break up the limit, right? That's why it was $20. And so, but I would always find like little toys and things to send back.
That's so sweet. Yeah.
Right? And even though they were secondhand, I felt like at least it was something, something.
Yeah.
And so I would send them back. And so, we always stayed connected like that. When I went to rehab in Florida, I actually stayed at the rehab that I went to for about a month and a half. And then I got
Mhm.
cravings pretty hardcore. And so I left the facility that I was at, and I found a Connect in Florida, and I started using in Florida. I ended up homeless in Florida for a period of 8
Wow.
months. And the whole time that I was on the streets up in Florida, I was always constantly calling them. And, there was times, and then eventually I came back home and my addiction continued. And there was a lot of different times I ended up in jail because of the things that my addiction would lead me to do. Right. And so,
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time in different facilities, Rio Arriba County up in Tierra Maria, and Las Vegas, New Mexico, and Gallup. But no matter what jail I would go to, I would always write to the kids, and their mom would have them write back. And so, we always kept that connection. I always felt that no matter
Yeah.
what I was going through, I needed to keep that connection as best as possible. When I was down here, like when I was in Farmington, my kid's mom, she took them up a couple different times just to go visit me. She didn't have to, right? She didn't have
Yeah.
to. When I was in Hernandez, the same thing every Sunday, because it wasn't too far from where I live. And every Sunday, and that one was a faith-based. And so it was at a real deep church setting. And so she would take them
Mhm.
every Sunday and drop them off for a couple of hours. And they were able to hang out with me. We'd hang out in the church and play on the
Yeah.
microphone and sing and, do whatever, to pass the
Yeah.
time, to stay connected. And yeah, and then in 2012, I was able to plant my feet back on the ground and reestablish my life. And so one of my main things, one of the main things that drove me to being able to figure out what it took to become sober and to step into that
Yeah.
recovery world was my kids. That was one of the biggest
Mhm.
things that were always on my mind. And they were getting older. I knew that time was passing. I knew the time that I missed out on in between that time. And I was just, really, really heart centered and focused on not losing any more time. Right. And they were already, by 2012, they were already at an age where they knew what was going on. Right. They knew what was going on. And I've always been open, even with my kids, when they got to that age where they fully understood, when they became, high school students, and, that age of teenage years where they knew. And I was always pretty
Yeah.
open with them and telling them, what was going on and what I was going through, what I was thinking, what my body was feeling like, what the drugs, did to me as an individual, and where, the road it took me down. And so they were always really open to listening and understanding that. And the kids never pushed me away. They had
Yeah.
every right to say, we don't want to talk to you. You did this, or you did that, or you didn't do this, or you didn't do that. Right. And they were always really
Yeah.
receptive. And so that in itself was a blessing for them, not
Mhm.
to turn their back on me, because they had every opportunity to do that. And so, but in 2012, like I said, I was able to plant my feet back on the ground and reestablish my life. And the whole foundation was my kids.
Yeah. Yeah. That's such a powerful story. And I think kids just have such a love for their parents, even if, like, no matter what situation it's in, and they have such that unconditional love and um appreciation and just forgiveness and everything. They look at you like you're a hero, even if you've done like the worst things. But I also want to commend your the mom of your kids for allowing you to have that access to them, since I'm sure that was not easy. And just having like more of the maturity to know what you're going through and stuff like that. Like she could have cut that access off, but it's amazing just how instrumental that was in your recovery. Um, and keeping your kids in mind. And then also I really like the story of, even with nothing, you found ways to give back to your kids in the goodwill or whatever, like just like that desire to provide and to show your kids that you want to be there for them. So I really like that story. And then I wanted to ask, during that time, when you had those brief visits or those phone calls when you were homeless, was there something that stuck out to you at that time? A particular thing that your kids said to you during that time?
Oh yeah, yeah. The one thing that always would stand out in my mind is I miss you, right? I miss you. And that was really deep. And whenever I would talk to my kids, whenever I would call them, whether it be from the street, from the payphone, from rehab, from jail, I never broke down, right?
Yeah.
Even though I always talked with a lump in my throat and a heavy heart,
Yeah.
knowing where I was at, knowing what I was doing, not knowing what their life was like on their end, except for what we would talk about. I wasn't there physically, right? And so that would hurt. And so I always try to keep it, upbeat and let them know how much I love them, how much I think about them, and tell them kind of about some of the positive things that were happening, even though I was in jail. I would tell them, yeah, I'm trying to do like some art on these envelopes, and it's pretty cool. And I'm watching these guys in here have so much talent, right? And it's amazing how much talent people have. And I didn't want to bring that world of sorrow upon them. But then as soon as I would hang up, that'd be a different story, right? That'd be a different story. I'd break down, and sometimes I'd go, back underneath the bridge and cry it out for a couple of hours, or I'd go back to my bunk when I was in jail and throw the blankets over myself. And I just, to myself, have my little breakdown and filter it out, right? Because it's not easy. It's not easy when you're in a situation like that, and wanting so much to be in another world, in another situation, and wanting to be there and trying to figure out in your mind, how do I get there? Could I get there? Right? That's that sense of hopelessness that people have when they're addicted, is could I ever even get there? And you could, right? You just have to put one foot in front of the other in a positive way. And eventually you're there and you're like, oh wow, I was able to get there. Right. But that's one of the biggest things that always stood out to me is two things: I miss you and I love you. Those two things.
Yeah, that's really powerful. My daughter, whenever we pick her up from preschool or she's with the grandparents, we come and see her, she's like, oh, I miss you so much. And it's just like that hug and just, oh, I miss you, daddy, like is amazing. You're like, oh, I miss you. And then you think about them when you're at work or you're doing other things. And just how precious that time is, and just how they want to be with you, even if you have to go to work and stuff. They're like, oh, take me with you. Or like my daughter would always say like, oh, I go to work. And you're like, no, you can't go to work with me. But they just want to be with you.
Yeah, it melts your heart. It melts your heart. I'll never forget when I got back. So when I was in Florida, like I said, I left the facility. I ended up homeless in South Florida, in West Palm Beach, for a period of 8 months. And that was a tough time, because I would call home and my mom would end up breaking down crying, and she would tell me that she felt like she sent me to my death, because when I was homeless down here, my mom like would always go looking for me, or she would hear, oh, I saw Ralph over here or walking over here. So she would know that I was around or whatever. When I was in Florida, I was completely disconnected. And my mom would always ask me, please come home. Please come home. If you're going to do your shit, just come home and, just do it over here. At least we know you're safe. And I would tell her, no, I'm not ready. I felt, but anyways, I spent a period of 8 months homeless on the streets. And then I got thrown in jail for some things that I shouldn't have been doing. So then I spent a period of 7 months in West Palm Beach County. And then it was during that time where I was able to kind of sober up and start thinking a little bit more clear. So I knew that the minute I got out of jail, I needed to come back home, because I was afraid of what would happen if I didn't, right? And so they finally gave me a release date. And so I called my brother and I told my brother, I'm going to be getting released next week. This is the day I'm getting released. And he said, will you come back home? I said, yes. He said, I'll get you a plane ticket for the day you get out. You get out, go straight to the airport, come down. I said, okay, cool. He said, let's not tell nobody yet. Don't tell nobody. Let's surprise mom, and let's surprise Natasha. Was young. Natasha must have been about 6 years old, probably 6.
Mhm.
And so anyways, the day that I got out, I flew home, and my brother picked me up in Albuquerque at the airport, and it was early in the morning, and we drove back to Española. And my brother said, okay, I'm going to call mom and tell her to pick up Natasha and bring Natasha over for dinner, and then we'll surprise Natasha. And I said, cool. Hey, we should do something cool. And so we went to there's a rent center that was operational at the time. And so we went to the rent center, and they had just unloaded this refrigerator. So they had this really big box. And so we brought the box home to my brothers, and we cut this little door in it. We cut this little door. And so the little door opened up, and we left the top open, but we wrapped it like a Christmas present. And then when my mom and Natasha got to my brothers, I got on the couch and I jumped into the box. And so box, and I was kind of kneeling down, and I can hear them. They walked in, and I can hear Natasha. She's 6 years old. Oh, uncle, that's a big present, right? And my brother's like, that's your present, honey. That's mine. Wow. I hear her like really excited, right? I hadn't seen her in a little over a year. So I had just talked to her constantly on the phone. So she stayed connected like that, but we hadn't seen each other in over a year. And so my brother said, yeah, that's your present. Why don't you go ahead and open it up? And I can hear her tearing away at the wrapping paper. And all of a sudden, like, it stopped, and I can hear my brother saying, what is that, honey? Is that a door? Oh, that looks like a door. See what's inside the door. And I can hear her, and she popped open the door, and I was like, boo. And she like took a step back, and she was like a little confused for a second, and then her eyes just lit up. And she says, Daddy, and she ran into the bro. I'm like, I feel like I have a little heavy heart right now.
Yeah.
But that was such like a special moment. We have it all on camera.
Wow.
So I watch it from time to time, right? And I see that like excitement of,
wow, that's amazing.
Her, see me again. And so it's like those moments. I mean, even now, like I have a 6-year-old, and it's with a different mother, right? And her name is Ava, and we had Ava in 2015. We had Ava in 2015, and I was already clean and sober, and on my way well into recovery, right? When we had Ava. So she's never had to experience that lifestyle that I was in back then. But I mean, even now with Ava, the same thing that you say, in the mornings, I have to take her to my mom's, because my mom gets her ready to take her to school because I have to go to work. And she's always, Dad, how come I can't just go to, right? And you're like, I could take you, but I can't. And, and even going after school to pick her up and waiting at the fence, and she's walking with her little backpack and walking, and they see you and their eyes just light up. There's like how you say hero, and they're like, Dad, and they run and they jump into your arms, and there's no better feeling than that, to know that you're that important,
that's amazing. And you said that you have that on video too with the box.
I do. Mm-hmm. I can send it to you.
Awesome. I'd love to share that.
Okay, cool.
I mean, it's such a vivid image like that I have in my mind right now of just that moment, but I'd love to see the video too.
Okay, I'll send it to you.
That's such a cool story. So you have mostly girls, and so I wanted to talk a little bit about being a girl dad too.
Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what are the particular challenges of being a girl dad?
Well, the particular challenges is that I'm not a girl, right? And girls, the boys and girls are different. They are different, right? In a lot of different ways. They think different. Their characteristics are different, and so just trying to put yourself in their shoes. They go through things, right? And so just learning more about what it's like to be a girl, right? And having that having that sentimental feeling of the feminine ways, I guess. I mean, I don't know really how to put it, but it's different. It really
Yeah.
is different. And they're, and teaching them different things, and I have a son, and he's 27, and even playing around with them, it's different. I mean, each one holds their own special, unique kind of love, right? But to be a girl and to be a dad raising a girl, and just knowing what the world is about, right? Knowing what the world is about, knowing how guys think, and the things that are happening in the world, and trying to teach them that, right? Trying to teach them awareness, and trying to teach them how to protect themselves in different ways, how to appreciate themselves for who they are, and getting them ready for the changes that life is going to bring, really soon, even when it comes to their feminine changes, because they change, right? They get into their cycles and things like that guys don't really fully understand, right? But we need to understand. We need to understand on a level to where we can be open-minded enough to be able to give the right type of guidance, and to do that for them. And so, it brings its challenges, but it's a learning lesson at the same time, because, growing up as a boy, we don't think about things that girls have to think about. We don't. But, so it's been a big learning lesson from day one, and it never stops. The lessons never stop, because the world is constantly changing. And so, we gotta change with the world when it comes to the types of things that are happening, and what we have to prepare them for, as a female, right? As a female, learning how to respect themselves, and how to approach, and being aware of the different things that might come their way when it comes to friendships and dating, and even the professional world, right? My older daughter, she graduated with her master's at the age of 25, and that was a really beautiful thing to see. I was blown away by her passion for education, and to get to succeed in life. And so I would like to think that, and she's told me before that how much she learned, because she saw me go through a bunch of struggle when it came to addiction, and when it came to all those things, and even though that was a bad thing, she took it and used it as a good thing to learn from it. And so it helped to guide her a certain way, and what to do and what not to do, and why you're doing it or not doing it, right? And so that was that was a blessing to see. So
and you must be so proud of her. And just did you graduate from college, or like, because at that time, were you like in your addiction? And
I was in my day, and I did try going to college on a couple different times, and then once my financial aid came through, I fell off track.
Sure.
I was going through my addiction. I'm like, okay, I want to change. And so I did. As a matter of fact, me and their mother, we were attending Santa Fe Community College. We started it was early 2000. It was 2003. As a matter of fact, shortly after Natasha was born, we had decided, okay, well, why don't we go back to school and try that? Maybe that'll help, me in particular, to kind of pivot in another direction. She was well on her way. My ex, she's a paralegal, and she got her paralegal certificate when she was 19. And so that was her profession, and she just wanted to grow in her profession. So we decided to go back to school, and on a couple of different occasions. But no, to answer your questions, I never did graduate. I did put in a few semesters and then fell off track. And then I tried going back a second time and fell off track even faster that second time. So I never made it that far. And I know how hard it is. I mean,
it's really hard. Yeah.
It's not an easy thing. And so to see her go through all that and become kind of like a role model for her brother and her sister. My son just graduated. He just got his associates in
that's awesome.
December. Yeah, he graduated in December. And then my 18-year-old, she's a freshman in college. She lives at the dorms up in Albuquerque at UNM. And so I feel like Samantha really helped to pave that way, right? And so it was very proud.
That's awesome. Yeah. And to see your kids like achieve their dreams and just being along for that too. Like were you at her graduation?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And I was looking for one of the pictures and I have one where we're all together at her graduation.
Yeah.
I'll send that one to you as well. But yeah, I did attend her graduation when she graduated. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool. Like, again, that like being able to be like a part of your kids' lives and those things and celebrate them in those ways and just see them and all the potential that they have.
Right. And I was always a little afraid when they were young and I first became homeless and, in between 2006 and 2012 and, they were growing and I would always pray and say, please don't let, them make the wrong choice in life and end up, going in a direction that I went in. And that's always a parent's, fear. But to see them go in the direction that they did it's just phenomenal. What's even more phenomenal to me, and because I count my blessings every day, right? I count my blessings every day.
Yeah.
Is to know that I could be a part of those pieces of their life, that they allow me to be a part of those pieces of their life, being that I was who I was when they were growing up for a part of their life. Like I said, they could have always just put back on me and they never did. And so that and it's just really, really big for me.
Thank you for listening to part 1 of my interview with Ralph Martinez. In part 2, Ralph shares more personal stories from raising daughters. Make sure to click follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, so you'll be notified of new episodes. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, go be a dad.